The Paul George experience has gotten off to a nightmare start in Philadelphia, as the prized offseason acquisition has been incapable of elevating this roster without Joel Embiid and has not fit well alongside him in the short term. And with that pinky injury continuing to be a topic of discussion, it does seem like we have to buckle up for this being way more of a long-term deal than any of us could have braced for. Now I get it. It is a pinky. That is how I feel as well here, but the reality is this is not going to go away for 6 weeks. And Paul George has been pretty open on how this is impacting him. And to get to exactly what he says, once again, this quote coming after the loss to the Brooklyn Nets, the tanking Brooklyn Nets, in which Paul George, without Tyrese Maxey and without Joel Embiid on the floor, produced a grand total of 2 points across his 37 minutes of action. Now, George was asked about the status of the pinky following the game, and he said, quote, "It's tough. The pain pretty much went down, but little things like ball handling, catching it, going left at moments. There were a couple plays tonight that were bobbled a little bit just because I essentially play like this all game. It's frustrating, but it is what it is. The break will do well for George, but he will still have to find a way to deal with the pinky issue and figure out the best way to handle it for when the Sixers return to play on February 20th. Now, if I want to be completely fair to Paul and completely objective here, I do think that there is an element of truth to what he's saying. That with my eyes watching the way that he does dribble the basketball and sort of him not looking comfortable in stretches that should be basic, what you expect from Paul George at this point. It is fair. Now, with that being said, I kind of don't care to this point. The reality is this hole has been dug. You just have to find a way to be better. I understand that's inconvenient, but I guarantee you look across your matchup, you look across the rest of the NBA, there's guys dealing with significantly more problematic issues that we don't even know about. Joel Embiid, I'm not going to stick up for him as a model of health, but I can't imagine that there have been games in which his knee does not bother him more than Paul George's finger. Now, Joel's stuck out and is already on my hate list for how this season has gone anyway, so this is not going to be one to pump his praise, but my point being here that every athlete has things they deal with. In my eyes, a pinky, a ligament issue on your non-shooting hand should not be the top of the list for what we can chalk up 2-point performances are. Now, to continue handing out blame for this, do also have to slide to Nick Nurse, who was asked about the status of Paul George following that 2-point performance. And Nurse said, quote, "I think he had a couple of opportunities there, but they double-teamed him a lot. They weren't going to give him a ton of looks. They pressured him up the floor when he got actions. Even the off-ball stuff, they would send to at him. So he didn't really have much of a choice on a lot of them to move the ball. I thought he did turn down a couple that we really expected him to shoot. But again, he's moving the ball, playing hard on D, that kind of stuff. Do we need him to score some points? Yeah. But we needed a lot of people too as well." That is an unacceptable answer to me. That there has to be a little bit of accountability held to Paul George directly here. And by the way, Nick Nurse, you're a part of this problem. That while he's saying that Paul George was being double teamed off the ball, that is not what I perceived in my view of that game. And I thought all the root of them getting the ball out of Paul George's hands was when he was the ball handler, sending doubles, sending traps at him. And to Paul George's credit in this case, he did make the right basketball play. That he swings it, it goes swing it around the perimeter, find a new teammate. If they're sending two at you, there's at least one guy open. That is the right basketball play. But with that in mind, and with knowing that is how Brooklyn's defending you, well, Nick Nurse, maybe it's time to scheme up some off-ball plays to create shots for your star. The Sixers have done a terrible job of that for Paul George, finding a way to ingratiate him into this offense so much on an every night basis. It's been figure it out basketball. You just roll out the talent, you roll out the guys. This should be good enough. We have more talent than them out there. We hope they win. I've seen not nearly the level of creativity that I expected from Nick Nurse for so many of these situations. And for Paul George specifically, he's one of the easiest players to ingratiate here. That he's got a nearly seamless play style with just about any team in the league. This is not a Joel Embiid situation or a James Harden situation in which they are the system. You can put Paul George on any roster in the league and he can find a fit there. But somehow, with that being said, the Sixers have done a pretty poor job of doing this. Now, when asked a little bit about, the status of it a whole, Paul George also wanted to open up about kind of figuring out things with his role on this team. And he said, quote, "I'd be lying if I thought it would come in here and this would be an easy process." George said of the growth, "It's been challenging. It's definitely been challenging, but I'm here to learn. I'm here to learn and figure it out too. He's an unbelievable talent. He makes the game easy with his presence and the attention he draws, but it's been a challenge. I won't shy away from that one, but challenges, I look forward to them. I'm going to embrace it and try to figure this out. With 28 games left, there isn't much time for them to figure it out. In order for the Sixers to reach their full potential, they will need Embiid and George to mesh and find chemistry at this stage of the season. There are conversations that the two have had on the floor that can help them grow as a tandem. These conversations better accelerate coming out of the break." And to add a little bit further to this, that he did speak a little bit more on this and taking a peek at kind of the stats of this, I do think were relevant to note. The Philadelphia 76ers are struggling along as they head into All-Star break, sitting at 20-34 following a loss to the Brooklyn Nets on the road on Wednesday. The Sixers have a lot of issues as they look to figure out the things as the season continues. As the Sixers move on, one thing has to be addressed is the duo of Joel Embiid and Paul George. Per PBP stats, that duo has a net rating of minus 3.74 and an offensive rating of 104.4 and a defensive rating of 108.1 in 365 minutes on the floor. Also, beyond the numbers, it's obvious that the two of them are not necessarily on the same page. It doesn't help that Embiid only played 17 games total and 16 of those with George. It slows down the process of building chemistry. And the number one number that I want to note here is that net rating of minus 3.74 when those two are on the court. That just cannot happen. Joel Embiid, for the first time since his rookie season, has a negative net rating when he is on the floor. That did not happen when he was playing alongside Al Horford, did not happen during Tobias Harris era, did not happen for the tail end of those process rosters. But it is happening with Paul George and with this current Sixers roster. That is straight up unacceptable. Now, to be fair to Paul George once again here, he was not brought here to be the guy. He was brought here to be a key piece on this team, and to keep it 100% straight here, Joel Embiid has been the biggest guy letting this team down. The lack of availability, and for Joel for several seasons now, there's always been the behind-the-scenes stuff. The concerns and the noise has been louder in that direction than ever before this year. Leaked locker room meetings, accusations of him showing up late to stuff, simply not playing basketball at nearly the regular rate that it is required to be a franchise centerpiece. These are all things that have gone down. With that being said, these were things that we could sort of overlook in the past because Joel Embiid was as talented as he is, was as dominant of a force when he is on the basketball court as he is. The problem being this year, there does not seem to be that same hunger from Joel Embiid individually and from this team as a whole. That despite where they stand in the standings, despite how many games they have lost and the lack of opportunity on the floor that they have had together, it feels like every single game they walk into just feels like a pickup game. That they're just going through the motions. This is just preseason to them. We just got to get a bite at the playoffs and then we'll really turn it up then. What in the world gives any of these guys that amount of confidence, and what have they done individually? Each one of these guys has accusations of being a loser. Paul George directly, nicknamed Playoff P for a reason. Now, granted, I think that's a little bit unfair to him, and he has had some high highs in the playoffs as well as some low lows, which are certainly relevant for Joel Embiid specifically. I don't think the playoff downslide is not nearly the way it is made out to be, but because that regular season bar is so high, the statistical reduction that is basically set to occur when all points are more difficult to come by in the playoffs is still a relevant point here. So with that being the case, with neither of you guys having a ring on your finger, with both you guys having accusations of being huge playoff fallers here, how can you just have this casual approach to basketball here? Now, granted, maybe we get two men possessed if they actually get a chance at the playoffs here. Do I think that is the case? No. I think the honest reality is there is that little bit of loser energy that Joel Embiid carries. We all know it. We've seen the sulking. We've seen the casually walking up and down the floor. And I'm not a proponent of the best player needs to be the leader. But what I do think is that sort of energy is infectious among a team. And with Paul George specifically, I don't think he's a guy that combats that or overcomes that or changes that outlook. That at best, he's sort of a neutral personality that can go along with the flow, and that just may be a little bit too much loser energy or attitude seeping into this entire organization. I don't know what you do from here for the Philadelphia 76ers. That unfortunately, there is no skip button. You have to play the second half of this season. The rest of this year will still take place on the floor. This final 28 games, I believe it is at this point, and you still got to figure out what the best direction is. My call at this point, I do think it is time to hang it up. That I do think if Paul George does not have this desire to win, then dude, why did you take this chance to come to Philly? This should have been swung. This was purely a money grab if this is the attitude for Paul George from here. I was perceiving as I still want to compete. Los Angeles doesn't want me. Let's go to the Eastern Conference where there's a clear path. I can join Joel Embiid, can join Tyrese Maxey to be a huge part of this vision of the organization moving forward. But I just don't know if that was exactly the approach that we're seeing from Paul George. The proof or the evidence that we're seeing on the floor certainly does not point in that direction. So if that is not the case, whether it is from Paul George internally or this organization, there are going to have to be some readjusted feelings and opinions and outlook moving forward. So some hard questions to come this offseason for for the short term, I just need to see some sort of competent basketball if they're out there. I understand the hopes of the season are gone. I don't even mind going to full tank mode. I get that being the right direction here, but I need to see some semblance of hope. Let me see that these guys actually have some sense of playing off each other, being capable of a little bit of two-man action in a way that you would think would be so easy for players of their caliber of talent. So we'll be interested to see how things unfold from here. I am sick of hearing about a pinky injury on Paul George, and boy, I can't believe these are the conversations that we continue to have past the halfway point of the season. But regardless, gonna keep rocking with you guys right here on Sixers Digest. Appreciate each and all you guys tuning into this video as always. Make sure you're smashing that subscribe button if you haven't already. Drop a like on this video, and I'll be back pushing through things, no matter how miserable this team looks. So I hope you guys are rocking with me. Talk to you next time right here on Sixers Digest, and peace.